My Aston Martin suspension's creaking like a spring bed in a cheap by-the-hour motel. Let me show you how to fix it. Welcome to another episode of Aston1936.com. Princess Piddle's front suspension's starting to creak like a 40-year-old fence in a windstorm. And keen observers of the channel will remember way back in 2018, which was really only 6 years ago, I had a front suspension creaking noise. And I took some video footage from back then, so let's take a quick look at that now. So you can see that when the car was going over some major bumps, I would get this sound, especially when it was cold. So that was back in 2018 when my car only had 33,000 miles on it. Fast forward 6 more years, I'm at 53,000 miles. So I put in brand new upper control arms from Aston Martin to solve the problem back in 2018. And they've only lasted 20,000 miles. And honestly, for the last 3,000 or 4,000 miles, the creak was starting to come back. And on top of that, my rear suspension was also starting to creak in the exact same way. So you'll find a link up here for where I'll show you how I actually changed the upper rear suspension control arms. So let's talk about what's going on with the control arms. And I actually have my old ones from 2018 here. And I've done a little bit of taking a look at them. So come on in for a closer look, cameraman Rob. So here's the upper control arm. This is the part that attaches to the wheel hub, and this is the part that attaches to the subframe. Well, it's these bushings here that are metal core, a rubber middle, and then a sort of a plastic Teflon outer that press into this aluminum control arm. And you can actually see the problem where the noise is coming from on this bushing right here. So this is my 2018 set. This gap shouldn't be here. And what's going on is that the bushing has walked its way out of the control arm, and the control arm is actually slipping over top the bushing. Now, the way these are designed to work, and I have a cutaway because I wanted to see a little bit more about how this thing was. This is the other side of one of my old arms. These bushings basically are press fit in, but this plastic I think is a design flaw. Now you might think, oh, well, you know, is it supposed to slip on there? The way the suspension is designed is that it's supposed to be bolted in tight. The center metal component is actually clamped with a bolt into the subframe. It does not rotate, it does not pivot on top the bolt in any way. That is frozen in place when the bolts are tightened properly. So this rubber that's between the outer and the metal, this is doing some flexing. And this outer bit should also be frozen solid with its press fit into the bushing, into the arm itself. And as you can see, well, obviously it's not, because that's where this gap is coming from. Either the arm is slipping this way over top the bushing and it's just walking its way out, or it's just literally the arm is dragging itself across. And when we look closely at this one I took apart, there's actually some scratching of where this bushing was twisting, I think, inside this bore. And there shouldn't be anything like that. It should be absolutely frozen in place. So I think it's probably not the best design, and I'm reluctant to shell out and get another set of Aston Martin original upper control arms, because it didn't even last 20,000 miles. So that got me thinking, what are my options? So back in 2018, when I started to look, I couldn't find a replacement bushing kit. You know, if Aston Martin actually sold a replacement bushing for this, I'd be tempted to buy it and press this one out and put the other ones back in. So that might have been a solution, but these cars are reaching 20 years old now, and one of the big polyurethane bushing companies called PowerFlex, I'm not getting paid anything to talk about this product, I went and bought it just like you would, have made a front upper control arm bushing kit. They actually make sway bar bushings, they make lower control arm bushing kits, they make all the bushings for the back of the car. They make every bushing now in polyurethane for the Aston. So I bought one of the upper control arm kits because I want to get rid of this creak in my car, and I figured what better time to try that out. So come on in and I'll give you a closer look of what you get in the kit. So here's basically, you get 8 of these bushing halves. So basically they've taken a regular bushing and split it into 2 pieces, so you put it in from 2 sides rather than pushing it all the way in from one side. The metal pin for the center, they give you those separately. And then for this shoulder, even though this has got a shoulder built into it, they actually have a harder outer wafer that we're basically going to be putting into the car as well. So you get all the outer wafers, all the split halves, all the pins. They also give you some PTFE silicone bushing grease, and there's a little packet. You're supposed to apply it to like every surface when you put it together. So just to have enough, I went out and I bought myself a tube of extra super lube. Same thing, just PTFE bushing grease made in the USA. I'll have a link to this maybe down in the description. So at this point in time, you're going, hey Steve, this looks great. How much does it cost? Well, a new set of control arms from Aston Martin are $900 per control arm. So a pair, $1,800. That is crazy just for some bushings. I'm sorry, I like my car, I love my car, but to drop 1,800 bucks to replace a bushing, that's asking too much. So $1,800 for the factory solution. A set of these, 279 bucks, I think, US dollars, and it does both sides of it's left and right upper control arm. So we're gonna give it a try. Now, out there, I can feel Mike from Bamford Groves cringing that I'm making this video. He's absolutely a believer, I think, that you should be putting in the factory parts to preserve the ride for your car. I agree with that in principle, but there's a $1,500 gap in the price here, and that's too much for me to ignore. So let me be the guinea pig. I'm gonna put it in my car and I'll do a drive test afterwards and let you know if I feel it feels any different. I'm hoping it's just gonna feel normal and there will be no creak. So why would Mike be cringing? Well, we're completely changing the material that Aston Martin engineers designed to isolate road noise from the car. But why didn't Aston Martin use polyurethane bushings in the first place then when they designed the car if they were available? Well, these are a lot more expensive material. Rubber is cheap. So they just don't put the time in to work to do the design for this because they're trying to make this part as inexpensively as possible. You'd think for 1,800 bucks they could use polyurethane bushings. But so this is a fairly low production volume part. It's firmer. This isn't made to be a race bushing, right? It says on the PowerFlex website, this is not for race performance. So this is more of a street, bushing material. It's obviously pretty stiff as opposed to just rubber, but this rubber is really stiff as well. So I think, boy racers tend to say put polyurethane bushings in, but I don't think we're making that mistake as Aston owners. We're not going track performance here. We're just going polyurethane street bushings. And if you're an Aston Martin purist and you're thinking, oh, this is going to completely destroy the ride of the car, well, I'm going to find out and let you know if it does or doesn't. Oh, it's going to destroy the value of the car. Well, I doubt it. I'm guessing this will be so imperceivable. You'd be crazy to think that anybody's going to pay you less for your Aston Martin when you sell it on. It may actually come across as, hey, I got rid of the creak issue. I fitted polyurethane bushings. So there's a debate that could be had there. I'm sure there's purists out there that'll comment. I'm sure there are boy racer or polyurethane upgrade people out there. Go ahead and leave your comments underneath the video. I'd love to hear it and see the debate go on. Okay, enough babbling, Steve. Show me how to install the darn bushings. I'm going to have an opportunity to show you in close-up on the bench because I have an old set here. And some good news, you won't need to remove the control arm entirely from the car. You'll be actually, the technique I'm going to show you, you're going to be able to press it out the old bushings in the car. So in your own shop, you don't have to use any major, setup to do that. So I'm going to show you how to do it, but let's head over to the tool bench and I'll show you which tools you're going to need to get this job done. So we sort of need two sets of tools. Because we're going to remove the upper control arms where they mount to the subframe, to do that, we need a 15 millimeter wrench, we need an 18 millimeter wrench, we may need a couple of different ratchets. This is my favorite bendy head ratchet, a couple of extensions, and we have a 6-point 18 millimeter socket and a 6-point 15 millimeter socket. And my torque wrench, which you're going to be torquing some bolts up to 115 Newton meters. So we'll be doing that. The star of the show that's actually going to be able to do the pushing the bearing out is a 2-prong pulley extractor. And my Canadian viewers are going to love the fact that I've owned this since I lived in Canada. It's Canadian Tire MotoMaster brand. But it's basically, it's a 2-prong pulley tool, pulley removal tool. And this one that's kind of like this is really important. So I'll try to find something like it on Amazon so you could get one for yourself. 3-point not is going to be as good. You want a 2-arm pulley extractor. To work along with that, I just have a 9/16 wrench to work the bolt. And then I have this. Why do I have a little 1/4-inch breaker bar? Well, this has this divot slot in it, and you're going to see how I use it in a minute. But basically, it's going to bridge. I'm going to use it as a bridge bar. And we'll show you how to do that in the footage in a minute here. So anyways, let's actually go over and do a bench removal of the existing bushings. So let me show you the trick to extracting the existing bushings just using this pulley tool. So coming in for a closer look, and one of the essential parts is here's the bolt and nut that we're going to be removing in the car. We're going to use this bolt a little later on. And we'll start by pulling this one that's already started to walk its way out. It'll be a little easier because what we have to do is we have to get the pulley teeth to grip, because you can't come around and just clamp over it. You have to get in between the flange on the bushing and the aluminum housing. So that's a little tricky. And I'm just going to back out the tool. I'm going to come in and we've got the other one. So now we're set up on both sides. And now we have to push. And I'm going to push on just the center part of that bushing. Now you'll notice with my tool though, I'm running into the other bushing right now. I cannot back my tool out any further. So I found that I can just get this wrench in, and you can improvise something on your own system. And now that's bridging across the steel center core. And all I have to do is just tighten this up. And soon we'll see the wrench bottom out. But you heard the bushing move. It's moving, it's moving. And I bottomed out on the wrench. But I've moved it about 1/4 inch already, so I can loosen this off. And now I can take the wrench out. I can put this bolt in and hook up again. So I've got the bolt head in here, and I'm just going to continue to tighten it. And each little bit that the bushing comes out, it gets easier to move. I'm just going to reset to the center of the bolt. Just kind of walking off a little bit. And I know you can go, well, gee, Steve, why don't you take it over to a press and all that stuff? Well, yeah, but I'm trying to find a way that I can, you'll notice, I can do this in the car. We're almost out. one bushing removed. Now, to do the other side, it gets a little trickier to start with. Classic adding a tool that I didn't talk about in the tool segment. We have to have a little gap here to get the arm under. So I'm actually going to get in here and crack this plastic back. And I'm going to do that on the other side. And we can basically get in here with our arm, push it into place. So you just have to keep more pressure on it. Put my screwdriver in here, make the gap. Back this out, and now you can back this out as far as you need to get your wrench in, or whatever you're using to do this trick. And cameraman Rob had a brilliant idea. Just put the bolt in right at the beginning, now that we have all that space at the back. And let's gently start tightening. So I found that for me, it's always been the purple colored bushing that's been hard, that's been easy to get out, the one that walked. This one you can hear was probably pretty well mounted in the arm, but the purple was way easier.
That other one was causing the creaking problem.
Hey, there's the sound I'm familiar with. There we go. So whatever the purple material is, seems to slip and shrink. You can even see there's this center middle area, and if we catch it on profile, it's bulged up. So this material is probably the flaw in this design. So anyways, old bushings are out. So what I'm going to do next, when I actually come time to put it in the car, is I'm going to clean this bore out with some brake fluid, brake clean, to make sure any sort of grease or anything is removed. And then the process is going to be, we're going to use the PTFE grease that came with the kit. I'm not going to put the grease on this part because it's not my real control arm, but we're going to lube up this surface in here. Then we're going to lube up the outer surface of all of this. We're going to lube up the inner surface of each bushing, and then we're going to press in the halves from the side, and these are going to go in just push fit. You're not going to need to use anything too major to get those to go in. Maybe you could wrap them with a rubber mallet if you needed to, or use a little C-clamp to compress them if you're struggling with yours. But once they're greased up, they should slip in easily. Then we're going to grease the outside of this pin, and we're going to slide that in to the middle of that. And then as we're putting the whole assembly up into the car, we're going to grease this face and both faces of this, and that'll be sitting, over the pin, and we're going to slip the control arm back up into the subframe. So that's the process, but the hard part was pushing out the old bushing. The easy part is putting this stuff back together. So now I'm going to do it on both sides of my car, and we're going to actually just set up the camera, and you'll watch me do the fitting. So let's go and get the control arms released from the subframe so that we're ready to work on them. All right, so the first step we have to do is we have to get this upper control arm released from the subframe, spun around so that we can actually work on it just like it was on the bench. So it's not very hard. So the first step is a tool that I didn't have in the tool video. I just need basically a little interior clip prise tool, because there are a couple of cables that run along the side of the control arm, but we want to reuse these clips. So we're just going to pry those out gently. Not left-handed though. Okay, that one's free. And then over here, this is the one for the brake wear sensor. So carefully get under it. So easily on my own. So we've got that loose and that loose. So here's our two upper control arm mounting bolts. 18s on the outside on the nuts, 15 millimeters kind of in here in the hard to reach place. So that's next is let's loosen these. You may or may not need to restrain the bolt, but this would be where you'd use your 15 millimeter wrench. And then here's your 18 millimeter 6-point socket. That's one. Now this one, there's a little notch in the subframe that you can get around basically with your extension. And we start to run into a little problem with this, is the socket's going to back out all the way into the subframe. And what it'll start to do is just push the bolt through the control arm. So I can't really remove it. So I'm going to give it a little knock. There we go. And the bolts basically come out that side, and I can finish taking this off with my fingers. And you're wondering, wow, is this under load? Well, no, it's not. So next up, you can just see if you can try to push the bolt through. And if you're lucky, out it comes. This one doesn't seem to be going anywhere yet, so I'm just going to give it a little persuasion. So cameraman Rob just asked a good question. Once I pull that bolt out, will the suspension flop out on me? Yes, and I forgot another tool I didn't mention. We need a bungee cord, and we're going to basically wrap it around the suspension and tie it back just so it can lean forward a little ways, but the weight of this can hang on the bungee. So where I hook onto it is if we come around here, there's actually a little cavity in the back here, and you can get the hook in. And then along the front here, you can come in across two of the bolts, and then I just go up, and on my left-hand drive car, there's a bracket up here. So that's all I need is something like that to take the tension so once this tips forward. So since I still can't get that loose by my fingers, I'm just going to take a screwdriver and just knock that through. And now all there should be is just to pull it straight forward. And you can just wiggle it, the suspension front to side a little bit. And what the bungee's here for is we're trying to protect this cable right here, which is the brake line. And we don't want any pressure on that. Because what I was really aiming for is just rotating this around, and ta-da, here's our bushings ready for us to use with our pullers. Let's cut over. We'll do this now in some time lapse because it's going to be the exact same process as at the bench, and I'll show you how you get it done. So before I clean it out, I just want to show you the original format, maybe cameraman Rob can come through and see the shine. Look at all the scoring inside the bore from rotation of those bushings. And you can see it over here on the one that was purple as well. These plastic bushings have been slipping inside the bore and working their way back and forth. So not the way it's supposed to work, but you know, I'm just going to use a little brake clean, or this is parts cleaner, and I just want to clean out that grease that's in the bore really well before we get started. So the next thing to do is to prepare our bushings. I've given it a seriously good clean in the sockets, the edges, both sides, and I also did the faces of the bores where it's going to go. So now we're going to put the actual lubricant on the bushings themselves. So I read the manual. They said cover every surface that slips. Now, cameraman Rob brought up a good point. It's like, well, I thought these aren't supposed to slip on the center pin. Well, in this design, the pin is going to be clamped just like in the old design, but the bushing is going to rotate against the pin. So there's actually even some hash marks inside the socket here to hold grease or this PTFE lubricant. So we're just going to get this all coated up on the socket side. I'm going to do this face as well. And then I'm going to put some inside and those little ridges in there. So it's basically, it's storing lubricant in those little cracks and crevices in there. So you don't want to be shy lubricating the inside. And then I'm going to do the outside edge. Now this guy is ready, I think, to put in. So we'll just go and see if I can just press it in by hand, just like that. Time to do the next one. Now I'm going to give the pin a little lube. I'm a little dubious that there's going to be enough lube as generously as I'm applying it to do all four, and that's why I bought myself an extra tube so I wouldn't be worried about going kind of overboard. So let's see if this can just press fit or if it's going to have to be tapped in. So I have a little bit sticking out on both sides. Now I'm going to put on these little bit harder outer shells. I'm going to guess the lube, this stuff is pretty tacky. So once I apply this, it'll stick it to the other part. I guess what we can see here too is there's actually metal inserts in here. I hadn't noticed that before. This one just happens to have them exposed. So there's actually some stiffener inside that bushing body. All right, well, one packet of lube, one control arm. So maybe I've been overdoing it on how much to apply, but I think it's a good idea to get yourself another tube, or maybe PowerFlex. You could call them and ask them to send you some extra packets. As cameraman Rob just pointed out, now for the fun part. I'm going to rotate this back around. And then I'm going to start to maneuver this up into position. And even when you're doing the factory arms, this gets a little exciting. So these are starting to fall off. You probably were having a good laugh as you were watching. So the ones on the towards the front are off right now. I'm just going to see if I can maneuver this up and get them started a little bit. Well, cut to an hour later, and there was a considerable struggle getting the little donut washers to stick on as we go into the openings. And you can see here I'm about to cut off the ceremonial elastic band that we basically put around at the halfway point just to hold the damn donuts in place as we pushed it in. But I've got the bolts in, started loose now, and when we do the other side, we'll take a time to film putting the donuts on, which we'll cut to next. So we're here on the other side, and I want to share a few tips that we didn't get filmed on the first, on the left-hand side. So first off, before you put all the pins in, what we found is that you might want to take the barrel and just see that it fits into the bore. There should be just a teensy bit of slop, because that's going to, when we tighten the bolts, the flanges are going to compress around it. So what we found on the other side is that the rearward one, this flange had been slightly tweaked over and you couldn't get this in. So I'm going to show you a tip that hopefully you won't have to use. I went and got my biggest crescent wrench, and we set the jaws to be just the equivalent of the flange. And while we were fitting it, now this is cast. You do not want to tweak hard on this, but you can see if I just apply a little bit of pressure, you might be able to catch that flange moves. And that's all it took from being too tight to being able to get this in. And what we found on this side, no problem at all. So I think someone at some point had over-tightened the rear on the other side. That someone could have been me. You know, I had actually measured the pins and all the rest of the stuff, but we just found it was a problem with one socket over there in the subframe. The other thing was that hopefully you got some viewing pleasure laughing at me as we kept dropping these little thrust washers off the side as I was trying to negotiate it into a slot that was too small. Well, we actually found a trick that helped with this was to fit a fairly sturdy rubber band to it. And you're just going to basically, these are going to be sacrificial. They're going to just hold the thrust washers while you're sitting there by yourself wrestling this thing up into position. And then you'll just cut them off. You don't want them to go through. You just want them to slip back onto the arm once you push them in, and then you just sacrifice them. So I'm going to go ahead and get the shaft in this one, and then we'll pick up the filming as I try to wrestle it into the actual sockets. Well, let's do another take at this and see how frustrated I can get on this side. There are so many degrees of freedom. So we're kind of, you're wrestling with the weight of the arm. Okay, so the front side started a little bit. Now, there we go. So I've got them started at the front and the back. And wrestle it into place. That's not going to fall out now. I'm a fair bit of the way in. you want it to be snug. It's one of these things that once it finds its kind of natural home, it's just going to go in easily. There we go. So that took about an hour and a half less than the other side. So this is the tricky one. So I've got the nut all the way to the right and the bolt kind of out, but it's just said we're still going to follow Aston Martin's procedure for tightening these up under load. Now, is that strictly necessary with the polyurethane bushing, the way this design is, where we're going to pin the center barrel, but this bushing is designed to slip over the center barrel. So probably not required to torque it under load, but just in case, I'm going to torque it under load. So that is snug. Okay, that's snug. And before we forget, I'm going to mount these zip ties. Let me just push back into the holes if you haven't broken them off, being impatient. Those two are in. And that's back in. All right, so next up, we're going to finish the other side so that we can then bring the car down and load the suspension before we do the final torque on these. So the next part of the process is I want to get the suspension back under load so that I can tighten these upper nuts. Now, like I said during the filming, I'm not sure if these polyurethane bushing designs actually matter if you do it under load, because it's actually, that rubber is actually going to be pivoting on the center metal shaft, but I'm going to follow the Aston instructions anyways, so I want to get the suspension under load. That's really tough to do when you've got the wheel on. So what I'm going to do is use a jack stand and then lower the lift and settle the car onto this. So I'm going to put the jack stands under the so right here under this, which will be a nice safe spot, I'll be able to simulate the load, and you'll see the suspension compress up into its resting position. So let's do that now. And I've done that. I've got that set up at all four corners. So we're just an inch or two off the lift pads, and the suspension you probably saw in the video is now compressed up into its normal position. So I'm going to go get the 15 and the 18 millimeter and my torque wrench, and we'll go ahead and put a final torque on these. Get in with my 6-point socket on here. I don't think the nuts or the bolt head is going to turn because they're already sort of preloaded. But I'm just going to leave that on there in case. And so So the suspension's pretty much torqued at this point. Just go ahead and tighten up the other side and make sure it's torqued up to the same 115 Newton meters. And then we're almost finished. So that's it. I'd say that's actually pretty much a DIY project that any of you could tackle. Probably I'd just plan on an hour per side to do that work once you have all your tools laid out and, plus the time of getting the car up off the ground. So at this point, you'd refit your fender liner if you ended up taking that out. Get your road wheel remounted, torque back up to the correct spec. Make sure you correctly torque the wheels. get the car back down on the ground, and time to go for a road test and see if that creak is gone. So I can probably still feel Mike from Bamford Road out there cringing, going, "Oh my God, Steve, you're showing these people how to put in these polyurethane bushings." I know, Mike, but these are $1,500 cheaper than going the Aston Martin route. I gotta try, and that's why I'm doing the channel, and I try to let everybody else know how it works out for me. So hopefully you found this video useful. Down here, you're gonna find a link to my companion blog where you'll find all sorts of interesting things about maintaining your Aston Martin, including my original article on how to change the upper control arms. I'll probably have linked here. Up here, you'll see the next video in my series. It'll probably link back to changing the upper control arm the first time, and you can see some of that process as well. If you like videos like this, please go ahead and subscribe. You'll get automatically notified when the next video comes out. As always, I love to hear your comments, so please leave those down below. Do you think I'm crazy putting in polyurethane bushings, or do you think this is a hero move? So I'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching.